Welcome back to GMT. The work culture in Silicon Valley has been getting some bad press lately. A Google employee was fired for his views on gender in the tech industry. Some firms, though, are trying to bring in changes on maternity leave policies that have historically held women back. The US is the only country in the developed world that does not require paid leave guarantees. So could these small steps bring major change? Our technology reporter Dave Lee has the latest report in our Business of Birth series.
When Martha Shaughnessy decided it was time to have children, she knew her job handling public relations for technology companies would become untenable.
I'd been thinking for a long time about all of the ways that work doesn't align well with being a professional parent.
She decided to set up her own firm and set about putting in place family-friendly policies, the types of which most people in this country do not have access to.
So I decided to be very intentional about building a business where we could be our whole selves, the mothers among us, but also being very clear with younger employees that if they have things they need to pursue that fall inside of normal work hours, that they could pursue those also, so that we're not favoring one stage of life over another or kind of penalizing one in favor of another.
Raising a child in the US is incredibly difficult and costly. Just 12% of private sector companies offer paid paternity leave for their employees, and the US is one of just 3 countries in the world not to have a paid parental leave law. But there is hope Silicon Valley may be starting a trend that could change that. Mums Rising campaigns for better maternity and paternity coverage for American workers.
There has been a lot of momentum from tech companies around increasing access to maternity leave in particular, and in some cases family leave and medical leave too, which is great. It shows that it really does make good business sense. These companies wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't good for their bottom lines. And that's good for our economy, and it's definitely, of course, good for those individual families and employees.
One of those technology companies is GoDaddy, the world's largest seller of internet domain names. The company has faced criticism in the past for being an overly macho workplace, a scenario prevalent in Silicon Valley.
Like a lot of tech companies, we have a lot of those same issues that other tech companies have. We're trying to resolve those, and we're trying to, continue to just build an awesome culture where people can do the best work of their lives. So anyone who's a new parent can get 12 weeks off, paid, to go really welcome their new family member. For the birthing mother, she gets an additional 6 weeks, so she's able to recover as well physically.
Silicon Valley is perhaps best placed to set the example, given the fierce competition for top talent. But progress requires people at the top of big companies to value both successful careers and happy families. Dave Lee, BBC News in San Francisco.
So what's the picture in other parts of the world? Let's hear now from 2 successful women in 2 very different realities. Helen Russell lives in Denmark. She's written The Year of Living Danishly and Leap Year. Aisha Sarwari is the co-founder of the Women's Advancement Hub and a columnist in Pakistan. Lovely to have you both with us. Helen, I'm going to make a huge assumption that I think many of our viewers will be making too, and say that maternity and paternity cover, pay, circumstances in Denmark is great. Is that true?
It's pretty good, yes. I'm currently on maternity leave with 14-week-old twins. Yeah, we get 52 weeks leave. Parents get to share between them. So people get to spend time with their children and really, as your contributor said, really recover.
And Aisha, what's the situation in Pakistan? That just must sound heavenly to you.
It does sound heavenly, and the situation in Pakistan is pretty harrowing. As you know, the Article 37 of the Constitution does guarantee about 3 months paid maternity leave to women, but the fact of the matter remains that that is mostly that mostly happens in government institutions, whereas the private sector is at its discretion to give whatever days it likes off in terms of paid maternity leave. And some really good organizations do 45 days, but really mostly this concept is non-existent. So when women fall pregnant and they're working, they almost assume that they're not going to come back to work when they return.
And how does that affect women, Aisha, when making decisions about whether or not to have a family?
It does make a difference, and it does have an impact, and this is why Pakistan is really low on the global gender gap index, and women's participation in labor is extremely low, amongst the worst. Obviously it's a huge deterrent, because on one hand, especially for working class women, this is a very big problem, because they need two pays to bring food on the table, and women have this immense pressure both ways to raise a family as well as to bring food on the table. So it's extremely taxing for the middle class.
Helen, maternity and paternity leave in Denmark has been good for a very long time. Is it just ingrained in the culture to expect that, or is it still an issue at all politically?
And I mean, as with the rest of the world, post-2008, I think Denmark is feeling the strain financially. But yes, as you're quite right, so post-World War II, they needed more people in the workforce, so they encouraged women to the workforce, and they realized that they were going to have to make it possible to have a family and a career. So that is just expected here. In contrast to the situation in Pakistan, I know two friends right now who've been promoted whilst on maternity leave. It's just perfectly normal here, and there's a lot of really good childcare set up, 75% subsidized by the state, so that 80% of mothers can return to work. It's just given that you can have a career and a family here, and caregiving is valued just as highly as breadwinning.
So is that the norm too, that your babies or kids will go into daycare when you go back to work?
Absolutely, yeah, and Danes very much believe that it's good for them to socialise. There's no stigma attached to it, and even if parents don't work, their children will still go to daycare. So yes, everybody sends their children to high quality state-run daycare from 6 months to around a year old. So there are no 1-year-olds wandering around. They're all in daycare during the day in Denmark.
Aisha, what options do women and men, families have in Pakistan when a woman goes back to work? What happens with the children?
What happens is that there is a bit of a social structure in place. So other women, mother-in-laws, sisters of the husband, cousins, usually there's a big joint family system, kind of help to raise the family. But we must also acknowledge the fact that working women are looked down upon. It's a stigma. It's not something that's very easily accepted. And so there's no integration between the process of when a woman marries, has a child, and then puts the child into daycare. There are no such formal setups. So you find women to be extremely strained. But we're talking about the working class here. The real problem exists in the informal sector, in the agriculture sector, for instance, where women have to immediately return to the fields or immediately have to return to some very gruesome work, and this affects them adversely.
Helen, what about the dads? Tell me about paternity leave. Would most men expect to take some time off to help look after their baby?
Absolutely. Yes, yeah. So there's a phrase, I think it's originated in Sweden, but it's used throughout Scandinavia, called latte papas, that a lot of dads take parental leave. My own husband's been on some paternity leave, and you see these huge prams lined up outside cafes where there are little loads of dads with little babies having coffee, or maybe a beer on a Thursday or Friday. So yeah, it's very normal. And even when people go back to work, it's very normal for both sexes to knock off at, say, 4 p.m, 5 p.m, and say, I have to leave this meeting. I have to go and pick up my child from daycare, or I have to start making dinner. So it's expected that the men will do their fair share in Denmark, and it certainly helps men bond with their children far more quickly than I see friends in the UK doing, where they don't get home until the children are in bed at night.
Aisha, does this ever happen in Pakistan, that men take time off, or look after the kids, cook the dinner, stay at home?
It's an exception. The norm is that women have come towards their progress the other way. So women have entered the formal setup, and so they have almost the worst of both worlds, the worst of the caregiving world and the worst of the labor market, because employers actually penalize them for needing to breastfeed, for needing to go back home early, for needing to do this, and men haven't done it the other way around. So men haven't shared the caregiving industry at all. So what you see is that the women of Pakistan and countries like Pakistan, and Pakistan is no exception, have a double burden. It's almost like it's a crisis to bear a child.
Really lovely to have your thoughts. Two very different situations in Pakistan and in Denmark. Aisha and Helen, thank you very much. Lots to talk about there, isn't there? I wonder what the situation is like in the country that you're in. We would love you to join in the conversation online, because we're asking how long you think is long enough for maternity leave. Let us know your thoughts. The hashtag is business of birth.